Welcome to the Sunday Signal. I'm David Richards, technology entrepreneur, co-founder of Yorkshire AI Labs, and weekly columnist for the Yorkshire Post. This is issue 59, Sunday the 21st of June 2026. Today's title, The Silicon Curtain. A single letter from Washington switched off the world's best AI overnight, and Britain is running on borrowed machines. Here is the hook. On the evening of the 12th of June, one letter from the United States Commerce Department forced the company Anthropic to switch off its two most capable artificial intelligence models for every customer on Earth within hours. No missile, no breach, a letter. And this week I want to make the case that we have just watched the opening move of a new Cold War, an arms race fought not over uranium, but over access. 4 stories today, and by the end you will see they are really one. The letter that started it, and what Britain must do now, the boardroom playbook for surviving the next shutdown, the World Cup in Boston, and the artificial intelligence now standing between footballers and the mob, and half of London's jobs already in the path of the machine, plus the weekly tech and AI layoff tracker, where Oracle alone has cut 30,000 people. If you are not yet subscribed, the newsletter is free at thesundaysignal.ai. That is thesundaysignal.ai, a new issue every Sunday morning. And if you find this show useful, please follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. It takes 10 seconds and it makes a real difference to whether this show reaches the people who need to hear it. Let's get into it. It did not look like an act of war. There was no missile, no breach, no headline until the weekend was nearly spent. There was a letter. On the evening of Friday, the 12th of June, at 21 minutes past 5 Eastern Time, the United States Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, wrote to Dario Amodei, the chief executive of Anthropic. That letter placed the company's 2 newest artificial intelligence models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, under export controls, and it barred their use by any foreign national anywhere on Earth, including Anthropic's own foreign-born engineers sitting at their desks in San Francisco. Because you cannot quietly wall off half of your own staff, the company did the only thing it could to comply. By midnight, it had switched both models off for every customer on the planet. They had been public for 3 days. Sit with that for a moment. The most capable reasoning system the company had ever released was switched off worldwide 3 days after launch by a letter that gave no detailed explanation, and that has still not been published. This is what the weaponization of cloud AI actually looks like, not a dramatic flourish, an administrative one, and I think it is the opening move of a new Cold War, an arms race fought not over uranium, but over access. Let me explain how it worked, because this is the part most people outside the trade did not understand until last week. Lutnick reached for a rule called deemed export, the clause that treats handing control technology to a foreign national on American soil as if you had shipped it abroad. In a single stroke, the reasoning inside a chatbot was reclassified as a controlled dual-use item, the regulatory cousin of a centrifuge part or a guidance chip. AI as a munition is no longer a line for a conference panel. It is now a category in American export law. So what frightened Washington? The reporting suggests the trigger was a demonstration flagged by a researcher at Amazon, in which Fable 5 could be asked to read a code base and surface software vulnerabilities. The fear on that account was simple and seismic, that a product sold as a writing and coding assistant was in truth carrying offensive cyber capability. Now, Anthropic dispute that in the bluntest terms. They say they reviewed the demonstration and found it had identified only a small number of minor already known flaws, and at least one outside security expert who read the paper says the model in fact refused the task. So hold the claim carefully. The point is not that Fable 5 was a weapon. The point is that Washington decided to act as though it might be, and the mere suspicion was enough to blind the whole world overnight. Here is where the comfortable analogy falls apart. This export control is being sold as the non-proliferation treaty of our age, but refining uranium needs vast, hot, detectable infrastructure that satellites can photograph and inspectors can count. An AI model travels down a connection in milliseconds, weightless and invisible, and a capable open version can be copied to a laptop and run behind an air gap forever. Export controls work where there is a physical choke point. There is no choke point on a thought. And the blowback has already started. By proving that the best American models are politically fragile, that they can be revoked between a Friday and a Saturday on the strength of an unexplained letter, Washington have handed a gift to exactly the ecosystem they fear most. When you lock down the strongest closed models, the demand does not vanish. It pivots instantly to open alternatives that cannot be sanctioned, the Chinese family of models chief among them. Two blocks are now forming in plain sight, one built on American models that can be switched off, and one built on Chinese weights that cannot. And every enterprise on the planet is quietly being asked which side it intends to sit on. Now follow that panic out of Washington and into the boardroom. Within days, JPMorgan removed Anthropic's Claude from the menu of approved models for its staff in Hong Kong, following Goldman Sachs, who had quietly done the same back in April. And the detail that matters is the trigger. These cuts were not ordered by Lutnick, and they were not handed down by Beijing. They flow from Anthropic's own licensing terms, which exclude Greater China, including Hong Kong. Read in the most cautious way a nervous compliance team can read them. That is more frightening, not less. It means the splintering of global finance is happening through ordinary commercial paperwork, one careful legal memo at a time. A junior analyst in New York now has tools that a vice president in Hong Kong is forbidden to touch. And the warning for London writes itself. If Wall Street firms will cut off their own people in a major Asian hub the moment a license looks ambiguous, what exactly protects a London office if relations with Washington ever sour? If your trading desk or your defense contractor runs on an American connection, your address has quietly become a liability. You are one letter away from the same midnight. This is the part that should keep Whitehall awake. British signals intelligence, automated threat detection, and a long tail of defense contractors all lean on infrastructure that an American Commerce Secretary can lawfully sever overnight. Worse, our own AI Security Institute had spent thousands of hours testing Fable 5 before launch, and the American ban sidestepped that work entirely. The lesson is cold. Being America's closest friend bought us precisely 0 minutes of warning. So what should Britain actually do? 3 things in order of urgency. First, the Treasury must build a digital deterrent, subsidizing homegrown computing power and data centers at serious scale, funded in the next fiscal quarter, and not deferred to the next parliament because you cannot be locked out of a model you host yourself. Second, the Foreign Office must negotiate a tech treaty, opening formal talks within 90 days for an ironclad exemption from American export controls. Goodwill is not a policy, a signed carve-out is. And third, our financial regulators must order systemically important banks and defense institutions to build air-gapped, open-weight backups that can take over within 24 hours of an offshore shutdown, not as best practice, as a condition of their license. Now there is a coda, and it matters. By Friday the 19th, Reuters was reporting, on the strength of an interview the president gave to Axios after meeting Amadei at the G7, that he no longer viewed Anthropic as a national security threat, and that talks had turned towards easing the restrictions. That softens the immediate crisis, but it does not erase the lesson, and it pays to be precise about what actually softened. The mood did, not the machinery. The directive was still in force. As I recorded this, the president would say only that he might lift it, and was not sure he had to, and he pointedly declined to rule out emergency powers. Access was suspended worldwide because one directive made it so, and no thaw can unteach that. So if you run a business, here is the practical version of all this. For 3 years, the default has been to plug your software straight into one provider and ship. It was fast, it was cheap, and last Friday, it was exposed. The firms that will survive the next outage are already trading convenience for resilience. They put a gateway between their applications and the models, so that when one is blocked or throttled, the request quietly reroutes to a backup. They classify their work honestly, keeping the low-risk tasks on cheap public services, but pulling the core of the business onto computing they actually control. They treat open-weight models as a strategic asset, not a hobby, because you cannot be locked out of a model you host yourself, and they win the legal fight before it becomes a technical one, demanding the right to export their own data and running real fire drills where the outside connection is cut on purpose. None of that is free. But the alternative was demonstrated last Friday at 5 minutes. Let me change the mood completely now, because I have spent this week at the World Cup. I am in Boston, and for the last week the city has belonged to the Tartan Army. Scotland lost 1-0 to Morocco, a tight game, but the day did not feel like a defeat. Earlier in the week, I watched France beat Senegal 3-1, and the lasting memory is not the football. It is that I got to share it with my son. There was so much negativity before a ball was kicked about transport and organisation and the whole experience, and almost none of it has come true. Credit where it is due. But football's passion has a dark twin, and we should be honest about it. Cast back to the Euro 2020 final, played in July of 2021, when England lost a shootout to Italy, and three young black players, Bukayo Saka, who was 19, Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho, missed their penalties. Within hours, a torrent of racist abuse flooded their accounts. The numbers are not estimates. The UK Football Policing Unit received more than 600 reports, judged 207 of the posts to be criminal, and found that 123 of those accounts were operating from outside the country. 11 people were arrested and convictions followed. A mural of Rashford in Manchester was defaced within the day and then buried under hundreds of hearts by his neighbours. None of that reached the players before the abuse did. That gap between the moment abuse lands and the moment anyone responds is exactly what AI is now being built to close. At this World Cup, FIFA are expanding a social media protection service and offering the moderation part of it free to every football association taking part. The system scans against some 30,000 keywords and hides an abusive comment in under 2 seconds. The sender still sees their own post and has no idea it has been buried and reported. It works across the major platforms, though, tellingly not on X, and the scale tells you why a machine has to do this. The company behind much of it reckons it has stripped roughly 1.5 billion hateful impressions and 15 million racist and homophobic comments out of global football. No human team that has ever been assembled could read 15 million comments fast enough to spare the player. Abuse at that scale cannot be policed by people. It can only be intercepted by a machine. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The platforms could do this themselves. They have always had the capability. They simply decline to, and so they build the hooks that let someone else do their cleaning for them. And finally, the number that should worry every employer listening. In April, research commissioned by the Greater London Authority found that about half of London's workers, some 2.4 million people, are in jobs where generative AI could automate or transform part of their work. The national figure is 38%. London is 46%. Now, the tempting response up north is to call that a London problem. It is not. The same study puts Yorkshire and the Humbers exposure at around 35%, which means roughly 175,000 jobs in Leeds alone contain tasks these tools can already touch. And the exposure does not fall first on the rainmakers. It falls on the bookkeepers, the payroll clerks, the people on the phones. There's a slower danger underneath too. The tasks AI handles most easily, the drafting and the summarizing and the routine checking, are exactly the tasks we have always given to the young. Strip out the bottom rung, and you weaken the ladder that makes next decade's seniors. Which brings me to this week's layoff tracker. The cross-sector total for the year has passed 511,000. The tech-specific total is now nearly 208,000, with around 31,000 added this week alone. Most of that spike is Oracle, who completed the largest restructuring in their history. Around 30,000 people, roughly 18.5% of their global workforce, and they are not in trouble. They posted $17.2 billion in quarterly revenue. They cut anyway to free up cash for a capital spending plan approaching $50 billion, almost all of it for AI. The creative firm Artlist shed 40% of its staff despite record revenue, because in the words of its own boss, AI native rivals move 5 times faster with a fraction of the headcount. Record revenue, it turns out, no longer protects you if your work can be done by an algorithm. So let me leave you with this. 4 stories this week, and read again. They collapse into one. A government can switch off your models overnight. A bank can wall them off from its own staff by reading a contract carefully. A mob can turn the network those models run on against a 19-year-old who missed a penalty, and a boardroom flush with record revenue can use the very same technology to clear the floor below and call it innovation. The thread running through all of it is power, and who holds it. The last Cold War was decided by who could enrich uranium and who could not. This one will be decided by who owns the models, who hosts the computing, and who is left renting both from the other side of the divide. For 3 years, Britain and most of British business has rented its intelligence from someone else's cloud and called the arrangement a strategy. On the 12th of June, we learned exactly what a rented strategy is worth on the day the landlord picks a side. The curtain is coming down. The only question left is whether we choose where we stand, or simply wait to be sorted. That is the Sunday Signal, issue 59. Thank you for listening. If this episode was useful, please share it with a colleague, with anyone running a business on someone else's cloud, and with anyone in Westminster who still believes that being America's closest friend is the same thing as being safe. The full written issue, with every source and the complete layoff tracker, is at thesundaysignal.ai. A new issue every Sunday morning. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please follow the show. It takes 10 seconds and it means the algorithm works for us rather than against us. Until next Sunday, I am David Richards. Thank you for listening to the Sunday Signal.